Hi guys, Harrington Richardson single barrel shotgun. It is a Topper Model 88. So what's wrong with this is that I don't know if that's supposed to be that weak, or the spring must be that weak, but okay, besides the stock being loose, it's got a transfer bar over there, and when you fire when you pull the trigger, the transfer bar is supposed to come up, and so that it can fill that gap on the hammer, so that it can get the energy of the hammer can get to the firing pin. And then when you leave the trigger, and the trigger goes forward, that transfer bar is supposed to pull down. Now this one is not. You see there, the transfer bar is still in line with the firing pin, and if I do push it down, it actually goes down below the firing pin, and that's what it's supposed to do. When you cock it, it moves up so that it can transfer the energy. After you fire, let go of the trigger. It's supposed to go down, but it's not. There, it's in line. So that's not working, and it can flip backwards, and then the gun will not operate. So I'm guessing there's a spring that has to push this down, and at the same time puts pressure on it so that it can't flip backwards. And I'm thinking that same spring might interact with this break open lever. So I'm going to pull it apart and see what the problem is. Okay, got it stripped down, got the barrel off and the stock off. All of the pins are more proud on the left than on the right, so I'm assuming they came in from this way. This one though is more proud on the right, so I'm not sure about that. These pins are serrated on the one end, and that serration bites, and I think I can see a little bit of serration on that pin. So I'm going to go this way. I'm going to start at the bottom, get the trigger out, and then build my way up to the top until I get it all out. I'm assuming these two hold in the trigger, that holds in the hammer, that I think is holding in the sear and the lifter, and I think that one's holding in the firing pin. So I'm going to take down as far as I have to go to get to the point where I need to maybe replace something. So there's the serrations I'm talking about. That does hold the trigger. There you go. So that's a plastic trigger housing, and it's broken at the back. The spring up there. There's a plate in there that's loose, and it looks like a hook. I'm not sure what it does and where it goes, and it looks like it probably went around the trigger pin. So that is the hammer pin over there, and it's got that staunch spring over there. That is what fires it. I'm going to leave that in place for now. I think I'm going to take out this pin first. and see if I can get, I think that is that this lock rotates on. Let me get that out. So all the pins are coming in from left through to right. Okay, got it apart. Gotta figure out how this works. Getting the rest of the pins out. Well, that holds in the lever that breaks the action, and the firing pin. There's the hammer spring. And there's the hammer. That's the post where the hammer spring rides on. There's the firing pin. It's got a spring that doesn't want to come out. There we go. Now, just got to figure out what's wrong with it. Okay, I got it all figured out, what's wrong with it. Starting off, this is supposed to be a plastic trigger guard that comes on here. And I'm assuming that at some point that trigger guard broke, and somebody then hillbillied this trigger guard to go on there. Not a bad solution. Those holes are not threaded because the screws are just hardware self-tapping screws. So that's how they overcame the broken trigger guard. The reason the top lever was floppy and didn't want to work was there's a spring there that has to push up against this lug to lock the barrel. That spring was missing, so that's why that was all floppy. The reason the transfer bar was not working properly was the transfer bar is supposed to swivel there but not swing over. So this is a replacement, looks like a handmade little bit of transfer bar, and they cut that area too big there. They cut that too big, which allows this thing to swing over, and it shouldn't. It should just be flexible to be able to do that. And that's why this can fall backwards and then jam up the hammer. And the spring for the to actuate that is, yeah, so that sits in that position, and the locking lug sits in that position like that, and it interacts on those teeth over there. And I put it back in the gun and I got it to work. So it was just not assembled correctly. Either this was not in the correct slot there, or because it is a bit of a mission to get it in. So that's really it. So these are available. I ordered a new one of these that will solve that problem. I ordered the spring that was available that goes on the trigger guard, and I ordered a new trigger guard, the correct one, because this one is also breaking out on the pinholes, and it's broken out at the back. And I'll return that back to the way it came from the factory. It's going to have those two holes there, but I didn't drill them there. So we got spare parts that came in. There's a new trigger guard. This one in one piece and not missing the actual trigger guard. Looks like the holes do line up properly. We got the spring that goes in there and actuates or presses up against the takedown lever over there. I'll call it the barrel lock. And then this is the actual transfer bar, and you can see the transfer bar cannot fall back. It kind of stops in that position, where this old one that it's been a repair, flops all the way back and can lock up the hammer. This one can't do that. Getting the Topper 88 back together, we got 3 pins of equal length, and they go into those 3 holes. We got 1 pin, same diameter, but it's shorter. It goes in on the top there, and then the thin pin goes into that hole. Starting with a firing pin and its little spring, put a dab of Teflon grease on there, just really to not only lubricate it but also to keep it in place while you try and slide it in there. A little cutout on the firing pin that goes to the bottom. Yeah, and then the pins go in from the left side of the action to the right. And I'm not going to be putting in that pin all the way, because that pin also holds in the takedown lever, but I need that space to get the hammer in. So I'm just going to tap that in so that the firing pin's in place, so that when I need to drive it out slightly to get that lever in, but that goes on after the hammer. Get that. So next up, disassembly. And what I got for that is I got a slave pin. Made the slave pin out of a roll pin, which I just shortened slightly, and I kind of spread it open so that it's reasonably snug there. Doesn't just fall out, but yet is quite easy to push out with the real pin. And I'll put some grease on there too to stop it from just falling out on me. So this goes on in that orientation. Got that spring lies in that groove over there, like that, and it sits in the last little cutout. You got these ribs or grooves, and it sits, the second leg sits in that. Like that. So there's the dog leg of the spring, sits on top of the transfer bar, goes around the pin, and there's the other leg, sits right there. Okay, I'm going to slide that in from the bottom. And this lock, this gap faces towards the back. So we're going to slide that in, lined up, and then we got to put the pin in and push out the slave pin with the actual pin. There's the slave pin. Don't knock these pins in all the way, because you might need to take them out, and you can finalize it when you get to the final assembly. Got it in. That's what it looks like over there. You can see that the new one does not fall back all the way to block the hammer. So it looks like from the bottom end. Next, we're going to put in the hammer. I use going to use the last two pins. The one holds in the hammer and the one holds in the trigger guard. So the spring sits on the hammer in that position. I'm going to put the spring in, and I'm going to use one of the other pins as a slave pin. So I'm going to put that in there. Just lightly, so that I can hook that spring onto there. And I want this leg to not sit, the leg sits over there like that, but I don't want it to sit like that because then I'm going to battle to get the spring in. I want this leg to sit outside the frame. Okay, so I'm sliding the hammer in from the bottom up. I've still got that spring on this, my slave pin. And I just need to get the hammer aligned. Okay, so I got the pin through. Got the pin through, that pin through the hammer. I'll tap out that slave pin. Slave pin's out, and now I've got the spring. You can see the spring sitting right there. I do not know if that shows up, but you'll see at the point of that. There's the leg that presses against that little peg on the hammer. Now I just push that spring into the frame, and there I got the hammer spring loaded right there. Next, trigger. Now we're going to use the same slave pin as before. Trigger's going to go in, and I got the trigger return spring, and that goes into that hole. All the way down. I'm going to use the pin as the initial slave pin, and then I'm going to use the slave pin as a transfer pin. I've got the trigger captured on with a little spring in there. Then we got this lever, and it is the trigger extension, and that's got a little stud where that little notch slots into on the trigger. Got that lined in, and then there we go. And we got that. Now I use that same transfer pin or slave pin, and capture all of it with that, so I can get my pin back for the assembly. There we go. And push the firing pin back slightly so that I can get the takedown lever in. Got the takedown lever in. So when that's up, that lug pushes forward and locks in on the barrel. Pushing the takedown latch or takedown lever up so that I can move that forward. Got to hook that trigger extension around the hammer pin. And then get the spring behind the lug. And then I just got to push this in to collapse that spring. Pull the trigger. Get the pin in. Yeah, put that in. I got to drive the slave pin out with the actual pin. Slave pin's coming out there. Okay, now fully assembled. You got to do a couple of checks before you knock these pins back all the way. So we got positive pressure on our takedown latch, and we can see that latch getting out of the way there for the barrel to unlock. If we cock, the transfer bar comes up. If I pull the trigger and I hold the trigger in, you can see the firing pin protruding. So we got firing pin protrusion. If I let go of the trigger, the firing pin will pull back. Now just knock the pins home all the way, put the stock on and the barrel, and it's all done. Hope you guys found that interesting. Stay safe. We talk again. Cheers.